The Misadventures of Mr. Wiggly and the Missing Cheese. Once upon a time, in a cozy little village, there lived a funny and lovable mouse named Mr. Wiggly. Mr. Wiggly was known for his twitchy nose, long whiskers, and his absolute love for cheese. He lived in a tiny cheese-themed house and spent most of his days searching for new and exciting cheeses to add to his collection. One bright and sunny morning, Mr. Wiggly woke up to find that his prized cheese stash had gone missing. His eyes widened in shock as he looked around his house. "Oh no, my precious cheese!" he squeaked. Determined to find his missing cheese, Mr. Wiggly put on his detective hat and set off on an adventure. As he wiggled his way through the village, he bumped into his good friend, Benny the bunny. Benny was munching on a carrot and looked up curiously. "Hey, Mr. Wiggly, what's got you all twitchy this morning?" "Benny, it's terrible. My cheese stash is missing, and I have no idea where it went," Mr. Wiggly replied, his whiskers twitching in distress. Benny put his carrot down and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Wiggly. I'll help you find it. Let's follow the clues." The two friends started their search, looking high and low. They first visited Mrs. Hoot the owl, who was wise and always knew what was happening in the village. Mrs. Hoot adjusted her glasses and said, "I saw a trail of cheese crumbs leading towards the river. Perhaps you should start there." Mr. Wiggly and Benny thanked Mrs. Hoot and hurried to the river. Sure enough, they found a trail of tiny cheese crumbs. "This way," Mr. Wiggly shouted excitedly. They followed the trail until they reached the riverbank, where they found their friend, Sammy the squirrel, happily munching on an acorn. "Hi, Sammy. Have you seen my cheese stash?" Mr. Wiggly asked. Sammy scratched his head and said, I did see some cheese floating down the river earlier. It was quite a sight. Maybe it got swept away?" Mr. Wiggly's ears drooped, but Benny patted him on the back. "Don't give up, Mr. Wiggly. Let's keep following the river." They continued along the river until they reached a small waterfall. There, sitting on a rock, was a group of ducks happily quacking and nibbling on something. As they got closer, Mr. Wiggly's eyes widened. "My cheese!" The ducks looked up and quacked in surprise. "Oh, hello. We found this delicious cheese floating down the river and thought it was a special treat." Mr. Wiggly laughed and said, "Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, but that cheese is very special to me. How about we share it?" The ducks quacked happily in agreement, and Mr. Wiggly, Benny, Sammy, and the ducks all sat down together for a cheese feast by the waterfall. They laughed, told stories, and enjoyed each other's company. As the sun began to set, Mr. Wiggly realized that sometimes, even when things go wrong, they can lead to unexpected adventures and new friends. With a full belly and a happy heart, Mr. Wiggly thanked his friends and headed back home, ready for another day of fun and laughter.